Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. A persistent call came at 10:00 a.m. His first thought was an alarm clock, but Michael immediately remembered that today was supposed to be Saturday. He was counting on getting more sleep, so the alarm clock was definitely off. He cursed. He reached for his cell phone, cursing to himself. Ethan was calling. Strange. We hadn't talked in 6 months, and now here he was, so early in the morning, yawning desperately. He answered. Well, who can't sleep? Michael, are you there? He asked the phone, in the anxious voice of a childhood friend. Who are you calling? The Pope. Michael said slyly. Don't be so sarcastic. Ethan sounded worried. The important thing is that you're okay. At least I can exhale, Ethan. Are you overheated in your soakie? Michael became curious, but he still did not understand what was going on. So he got a little angry. That's what I thought when I saw your picture in the cemetery. Of what? Ethan's sentimentality and overly tactfulness were always hard to suspect. What? Michael protruded in surprise. The absurdity of the situation was rising steadily. If it were not for his firm conviction that Ethan had been alcohol intolerant for years, he would have thought he was in the grip of delirium. It wasn't like it was April 1. June is in full swing. Besides, it's a bit much to joke about, you know. What cemetery? I don't get it. I'll tell you. Ethan had clearly calmed down and now tried to be very brief and to the point. I went this morning to a village. There is a great honey nearby, and I am an amateur in this business. I arrived as arranged, but the owner's not at home. The family said he went to fix the fence at the cemetery. I decided not to wait and to go straight there. Maybe I could do something to help. He's an old man. You know, what's the scenery in a place like this? Monuments, crosses, people looking at the dead from the portraits, dates with a line through them. No reason to be optimistic. You cannot help but think about the perishable nature of life. I walk around. I look around looking for someone I know. So I found him. Just not the one I was looking for. That's it. Not Tommy. Michael couldn't take it anymore. My friend had a tendency to be melodramatic. But not on a Saturday morning. Not on a legal day off. Tell me who you got your eye on. Didn't take you long. Ethan. Your face looked at me from the portrait. I was taken aback. I came closer and read it. William. What's your birthday? April 7th. Yeah, Michael still didn't know what he was getting at. That's right. The day and the year of birth are the same, except it was right next to each other. There was a second date, which said that the year before your double had left the world. That doesn't make any sense. Michael knew in his mind that such things were not to be trifled with, but he could not make sense of what he had heard. It was a coincidence, just a man like me. We were born on the same day. I'm sure that happens. I didn't get it either, Ethan said. I came to my senses a little, found my Mellifer. He explained that there lived in the village a guy, William, and his wife and daughter. Where are they from? The man did not know. The wife got a job as a teacher at the local school. The guy worked as a firefighter. A widow was killed in a fire, and a sick daughter helped them in any way they could. The guys from the fire department erected a monument. That is the story. I called you right away. It's a strange story. Michael felt like he was finally awake. But now you made sure I was alive and well. I made sure. His voice sounded a little guilty. I'm sorry I woke you up. It's just there's such a resemblance that you don't happen to have a twin brother to you. By any chance? No, my mother has one. Michael grinned, and suddenly he felt his heart skip a beat. Why would that be? Yes, that dream came to mind. Oh, Ethan, he should have called with such news. They chatted for another 10 minutes, and then Ethan passed out. Michael went to take a shower, stood under the cold water. It usually helped to cheer him up, but now he couldn't shake off thoughts of something he'd forgotten, like that dream he'd had for years. He saw himself as a little boy of about 5, about white and blue. blue-eyed with a prominent mole on his shoulder. Except he was looking at himself from the side for some reason. And then the other Michael reaches out to him, waving, calling. But there's no way to approach him. And the little doppelganger gradually disappears into the gray mist, as if dissolving in it. Each time after this dream, Michael woke up from his own scream. His mother, who worked 2 jobs, did not take him to the now fashionable psychologists. And where would she get the money for such an expenditure? She took him to his grandmother. Michael remembered that. Or rather, not even the grandmother herself, but the dark room, smelling of herbs and incense. The candles on the table, the voice, the drops of wax, frozen in water, and the way his mother had screamed like an eerie wounded bird. He was so frightened then that he stuttered for a week. No more his mother tried to treat him. But the dream remained, and now he remembered it clearly and in detail. And that strange sensation that it felt like it was splitting in two, and the other part of him was living his own unknown life, and he couldn't put himself back together. Ethan's story knocked him out so much that Michael kept coming back to it mentally. Everything fell out of his hands. Simple things were forgotten, and by lunchtime, he was so exhausted that he gave up on everything he had planned to do. "You're tired," my brother said to himself, and glanced at his phone. After all, he had really worked hard. Why not allow himself a sudden rest for a couple of days? "Ethan, where are you staying?" Now it was his friend's turn to be surprised by his call. "I think I'll come up to your place. I'll see how it is. They say Sochi is cooler than Turkey now. I thought I'd see for myself." In the evening, Michael settled on the top shelf of the compartment, blocked out the headphones from the chattering passengers, eager for a summer vacation, and almost immediately fell asleep without any dreams. Ethan met him at the station and took him to the sanatorium. It was quite decent, I must say, and besides, Michael didn't intend to stay here for long. Ethan didn't push it. Apparently, he felt a little guilty and took him to the very place where he had seen the unfortunate photograph. "Do you understand now?" he asked as he watched Michael stare into the face of his doppelganger in the black mourning frame. It was uncomfortable for both of them. The resemblance was indeed absolute. Maybe we should think of it as a coincidence and get on with our lives. There are doubles in the world with the same date of birth. Michael chuckled as he looked at the photo. He felt more creepy than he'd ever felt in his life, like he was looking at his own monument. "Then I don't know," Ethan shrugged. "Let's ask around, see if anyone knew. I mean, the guy was applying for a job. He showed us his papers. He had friends in the same firehouse. How do you figure?" Michael was still struggling with his words, but somewhere deep down inside, he knew he was ready to find out all the details of this more than strange coincidence. "I came to say hello. I came here to find out what kind of double I had." "So you do not say that Ethan's double." It seems that any question was ready to be answered. "Tell him he's not my brother. He's my cousin. That's why they have different patronymics." "And what are the similarities?" "I don't know how brother happens in life, but the word scratched me right in the heart. It doesn't make any sense. He doesn't have a brother and never has had one. The main thing is to keep the widow out of sight," Ethan said quickly, not looking him in the eye. "She's been through enough already, and here, such a portrait resemblance. You'd drive me insane. Couldn't have done it without you." Michael snapped. He couldn't keep his eyes off the picture in the black frame. "If you're so smart, tell me, where does your honey doctor live? Maybe he can tell us something." "Grandpa Liam." Ethan came to life. "Maybe everyone goes to him for honey, and he cures someone in the process. Propolis is the cure for 100 diseases. Bring him to your healer." Michael stepped over the fence. Ethan followed him. Liam's grandfather was at home. He was a sturdy man, with gray hair pulled back into a ponytail and a sly squint in his time-bleached blue eyes, so piercing it made Michael uneasy. Only then did he realize that he, too, had picked up an uncanny resemblance to the dead fireman, and was now trying to figure out if his eyes were deceiving him. "My name is Michael." The guy was the first to start the conversation. "A friend wrote that my brother's grave was found. The words came out with some difficulty. But my grandfather didn't seem to notice the hesitation. You mean William? He joined in the conversation. I see you were painted from the same portrait. Oh, it's a pity about the man. I wish I'd lived. How did it turn out? We were celebrating a holiday. Somebody must have overlooked it. Or maybe they were drunk. But of course, the lights went up. When William was taking the horses out of the stables, the beam collapsed. Orphaned his wife and daughter. That's the way it is. Do you have any idea where their family came from? Michael tried to find out. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. It just so happens that my parents went to different places, so I don't know much about William. Neither does anyone else. Grandfather scratched the back of his head thoughtfully. It's just the way we have people here. And they live here. There's work for everybody. They are both friendly and sociable. He and his wife, Adriana. She got a job at the local school as an elementary school teacher. Everybody loved her very much. And what's more interesting, the kids are usually strangers to other people's illnesses, and with a sick Betty daughter. They were friends. What about the girl? Michael asked. It would seem that why should he care about someone else's family? A stranger's trouble. They say she has a serious heart problem, Grandpa Liam said. That's why they brought her here to the sea to breathe the salty air. William loved his daughter and worked a double shift at work. All he wanted to save up for treatment. And then you see how fate turned out. Michael listened to his grandfather's words, but his heart was heavy for some reason. Was it a premonition? That's the word fate. It seems to us that we are decisive, but in fact everything is not by chance and leads us through life as if by a thread. That's what brought him here, it turns out. Grandfather, I'm here for your honey. A melodious female voice was heard behind him, so loud that when Michael turned around, he expected to see a young girl, but he saw the huge eyes of a grown-up woman, in which surprise was replaced by hope and terror by incomprehension. William, and she collapsed to the floor unconscious. A commotion erupted, and the fainting young woman was placed on the couch. Ethan, as a practicing physician, began to unfasten her collar. Michael ran to get water, and Liam's grandfather shoved something pungent-smelling under her nose, muttering to Adriana, "Wake up. Don't scare the old man, Adriana." The wife. No, the widow of the strange-looking guy who looked just like him. I can't believe this is happening. What do we do now? You tell me. Run away. That would only make it worse. Michael still hasn't figured it out. What to do, and it was too late. Adriana opened her eyes, looking for him. What? What happened? Who are you, Adriana? It is your William's brother. The cousin in a soothing tone began to explain his grandfather. He heard about the trouble, he came. They haven't seen each other for a long time, you know. Well, never. In his mind, Michael corrected him. Apparently, the same thought had crossed Adriana's mind. William never told me about his brother, she said, keeping her piercing black eyes on him. Wow, surely it must be uncomfortable for students to admit under such a fiery gaze that they didn't learn their lessons. What are you thinking about anyway? Michael wondered to himself. What's the matter with her eyes? Otherwise pale and thin. It will pass, and not notice. You noticed this internal dialogue was beginning to annoy him. What's he up to? Arguing with himself. That's how it happened, Michael said. It can't be fixed now. Can I help? What can I do? Bitter. Adriana grinned. William will not come back. My daughter is sick. How can you help? My cardiologist friend Michael and Ethan looked at each other. Ethan nodded and interjected himself into the conversation. Let me take a look at the tests and appointments already looked at. Adriana took a deep breath. A heart defect from birth. This is how they send the girl from one doctor to another. Each time a new treatment, and still no improvement. Thank you for your support. We're just used to doing this on our own. And your parents and William? Michael asked, realizing how impolite that question sounded. I'm an orphan growing up in an orphanage. Adriana grinned. And William never introduced me to his parents. Apparently, it's complicated. Maybe you know about it. No, Michael shook his head. We really haven't seen each other for a long time. Adriana looked at him with a slight squint, and he realized how strange his story sounded. Maybe I can help. It's not like we're strangers. Words flew off his lips on their own. Let me at least make it up to him in money. For not having seen my brother for so many years, do not blame yourself. Adriana stood up and took the jar of honey handed out by Grandfather Liam. Life is so ornate, it will put everything in its place in time. I have to go now. Betty is home alone. I'd like to meet her. Michael decided not to give in and let her go alone. This strange and very strong woman. Here comes the doctor with us. It certainly won't get any worse. Ethan, for whom everything has already been decided. He just nodded. Adriana thought about something, looking from one to the other. You are very much like William, aren't you? She said quietly. I don't think you should see Betty. I'll go, Ethan said. It wouldn't do any harm to get a consultation. And I'm a good doctor, I promise. He said it so convincingly that Adriana smiled a little on the corner of her lips, but she looked incredibly handsome. Maybe because the look of despair disappeared from her face for a second. I'll wait here for you, Michael said to his friend. His friend nodded, and Michael noticed how he changed in an instant. Where had the usual joker and jester gone? The slacker. Now Ethan, one of the country's leading cardiologists, stood before him. A star of medicine for a moment. Michael really wanted Adriana to turn around. He watched them walk away and called out to her. Look at me, don't go away. So simply she turned around, and the two gazes met, despite the curtained window separating them. In that very second, Michael realized that he would never let this woman out of his life. Look, boy. Oh, look. There was an old man's voice behind him. Michael turned around abruptly. Grandfather Liam wagged his finger at him with the most serious face. Don't you dare give up hope for nothing. I understand. She's had enough. She only looks like she's had enough. Steel has borne such misfortune, but hope can break her for good. I know I won't, Grandpa. Believe me, just as seriously, replied Michael. I don't understand. The old man confessed. Pouring tea, he nodded. Sit down. You're lying. And where and what? I can't make it out. Michael sat down at the table, sipped his tea, and told this unfamiliar grandfather the whole strange story about the phone call. Suddenly, he wanted to see a picture of the unknown man with his face and date of birth. Grandfather Liam listened very carefully, without interrupting, occasionally nodding his head. Yes, the situation, he pronounced longingly. I don't believe in such coincidences. There must be some mystery here, or I spoke to my mother. I didn't want to worry her. What am I talking about? For as long as I can remember, I've been alone with her. I've never even seen my father. She didn't tell me who he was, where they met. Why bother her? Why don't you ask her? Grandpa Liam didn't give up. Gently. What if something opens up? So they sat over tea for a long time until the door slammed, letting a frowning Ethan into the house. So they said together. I looked at the papers. Looks like a bad case, all right. Congenital heart defect with complications. It's treatable. Straight up. Michael asked. It is curable, but it is expensive and preferably not here. Liam's grandfather poured tea for him. He sat down, rubbing his hands together and wrinkling his nose. The girl is lovely, friendly. You can see such eyes and icons. A light soul. Every time I ask myself the question, why? There are all kinds of bastards living in this world. They're healthy. And here is such a pure, angelic heart. And it hurts. Hey boy, don't make God angry. Grandpa banged his fist on the table. It was so sudden that they both flinched. Trial is not given in vain. And not so much for the innocent children as for us adults. What are we worth? What are we worth sacrificing? Be quiet, Grandfather. Michael wrinkled his nose, as if it was his heart that was hurting now. Everything will be a friend. Find out where they do it, how much it costs. I will think. Michael began, but when he saw his friend's face, he stopped. All right, do as you please. He finished and took me to the train station. Michael asked his friend, I have to visit someone. Liam's grandfather, who had been watching them all along, bustled out. He came back with a couple of cans, handed them to the boy. Give these to your mother. Healing tinctures. Thank you, I will. Michael hugged the old man and smiled. He was a good grandfather after all. Responsive, walking along the outskirts of the village. Familiar to him and seemingly unchanged over the years, Michael felt guilty towards his mother for seeing less and less of him. And the money he sent regularly was like a payoff for remembering him as a snot-nosed, cocky boy. And he forgets his homeland, locked in the crazy rhythm of city life. Don't be angry. Here he came to himself out loud, said Michael, opening the familiar creaking wicket. The curtain in the window fluttered open. Mom's face flashed. And there she was, on the doorstep herself. Joyful, confused, aged. Oh, how she got old. And he didn't even notice. Michael, my son, came, and from this forgotten address. My nose tingled. He clumsily hugged her frail, small, pressed against him. Come, Mom. Here I am, at last. That's good. Now we will have dinner. I made your favorite borscht. And her eyes are shining, glowing with unearthly joy. Michael listened to her, obediently ate delicious borscht, and he thought about how to get to the main thing. Why he came here. Listen to all the local news, stories about the fate of former classmates. Along the way, I repaired a leaky faucet and a locker door. And only then, as if he jumped into the water from a diving tower, he talked to my mom. Here, a strange story happened. I met my double. Mother froze in a half-syllable word, threw his head up, looking into his eyes. What do not understand, Michael? What do you mean? The double. Michael told her briefly about the call, about the trip to the cemetery. He tried to speak softly, but somehow her mother suddenly went pale and began to slide to the floor. I managed, picked up her in his arms, put her on the couch, cursing myself. What on earth? Mom, what are you? Nothing. Nothing will pass. Now give me a pill. Over there on the table, they whispered in a weak voice, Mother. I shouldn't have started this conversation. Michael got upset, but Mother shook her head negatively. It is right. It is hard for me to live with such a burden in the world, all the more to carry it with me to the other world. Mom, what other world? You will live a little longer. Her mother had large tears rolling down her cheeks. The boy sat down beside her, took her by the hand, stroked her, while she was gaining courage for a difficult conversation. Son, promise me you won't hate me. He certainly wasn't expecting that. Mom, don't talk nonsense. I love you. You're the dearest person in my life. Promise. She looked so pleading that Michael gave in. I promise, Mommy, no matter what you tell me, I will always love you. Okay, she was quiet, apparently making up her mind. And then she began to speak, and much of what he had not been able to answer before became clear. Emotions aside, it was the story of a romantic provincial girl who fell in love with a beautiful prince from a distant city. The main and only love of her life did not end in a fairy tale. The prince left without leaving his address or phone number. And the girl found out that soon she would be a mother without a husband at the age of 17. In a town where everyone knows each other and is extremely concerned about moral standards when it's not about them. It's already a bad enough situation. However, she became quite frightened when she found out she was expecting twins. There were complications, and the doctors at the local hospital sent the poor woman to give birth in the capital out of harm's way. Michael listened in silence, and as if a puzzle was forming in his head, a lot of things that he had not been able to find an answer to before became clear. Lying down, I'm crying. Quietly, almost in a whisper, my mother was saying, and next to me a girl is lying against the wall, turned away. And suddenly she turns around, and she screams at me, "How dare you shed tears? You're lucky to have 2 kids, and God is punishing me. I don't know what for. The 3rd time, the baby was stillborn. My tears have dried up. That's the bitter part. And my neighbor suddenly jumped out of bed and fell on her knees in front of me. Give me 1 child. You can't lift 2 of them with your crazy eyes. And I'll raise them up. I will. My husband. And I live well. Don't doubt it. I was mad with grief at the time, too. I must have given your brother away. I could barely hear. My mother was silent when she finished. So he found out the truth. It turns out that the boy who died in the fire was really his twin brother and the little sick girl. The native niece means he was named William. My mother looked past her son into the past. I even tried to get a phone from the nurse at the hospital for my ring. The only thing I bought was that they told me not to call again. And they hung up on me. Mom, you kept the number, didn't you? Without much hope, Michael asked, but his mother nodded and pointed to a box in which, for as long as Michael could remember, she had kept her most precious possessions, her wedding ring, her grandmother's necklace, a keepsake, rewards for her hard work. There's a phone number and address on a piece of paper. Kathy, I think the deadline has passed for all secrets by now. With our boy gone, she turned to the wall and sobbed out loud. Michael stroked her back, brought her water, and felt like an incredible monster. I'm sorry, Mom, he repeated. It's you, me. I'm sorry, son. Both of you, I'm sorry. My mother sobbed and turned to him. I was only 17 years old. We can't change the past. Softly said Michael, and his brother can't come back. But you can help his widow and your granddaughter. William worked his whole life to cure Betty. Now it's my turn. I don't think Kathy will stay on the same side. There's more to it than that. Adriana casually let it slip that William had no contact with the family. Maybe there's something there that can be fixed. Betty, Adriana. Mama said those names as if she were stroking. Do you think they'll want to see me? Of course, Michael assured her fervently. Though I wasn't so sure of that myself. You'll make a wonderful grandmother. And when are you going to make me a wonderful mother-in-law? Her mother smiled slightly, and Michael realized that she had finally come to her senses. Now that she brought up her favorite subject, when would I meet someone like Adriana? The words came out of his mouth, and Michael was surprised, and then realized that it was not a reservation of the black-eyed girl. She had caught him and was stuck in his head. It could hardly be explained by feelings of pity alone. That's how you met her. Mom was watching very carefully. And Michael preferred to steer the conversation in another direction, and then he headed back, vowing to finish the story. And then they would go together to the sea to visit Adriana and Betty. The grandfather lives there is terrific, Michael joked. He's in the honey business, and it's not like the grandfather is straightforward to say a tough guy named Liam. I don't know about that. Did you want to marry me off? Mom laughed and waved a towel at him jokingly. It is too late for me to think about it. First, my son needs to get married, wait for grandchildren. Oh, Mother, I'm off before you marry me right here. Michael was glad that the difficult conversation was over. Mom seems to be all right, even joking around. What about her story? He's not her judge. I bet she's been tormenting herself all this time like no executioner could. Who are you? How did you get my phone? Kathy's voice was sharp, high, and demanding. My name is Michael, and I am your son's brother. Michael thought it would be easier that way at once, without hints or insinuations. There was silence on the phone for a few seconds, and then the invisible interlocutor answered, "All right, come on over." Kathy was evidently to match her voice, tall with a girlish figure and elaborate hair, piercing eyes, and regal gestures. At the sight of Michael, she did not clutch at her heart. No muscle flinched in her face. She simply looked him over from head to toe and said, "Yes, you are indeed Brother William. Come into the room." The furnishings in the luxurious apartment were elaborate, well-chosen, tasteful, and spoke for themselves. I caught my eye on a large portrait of a man in a military uniform, looking sternly from the wall. "This is my late husband, Jacob the General. In an even voice, Kathy said with a nod, pointing to Michael's chair and lowering herself gracefully into that opposite ask. Admittedly, he was confused. Michael had expected some other reaction, indignation, tears, anything but this kind of calm. He suddenly felt the urge to hurt this praised woman. Clearly never knew what need was. The boy you took from my mother, he's dead. You are aware of Michael's question. Without even trying to soften Kathy's wording, she withstood the blow. She was silent for a long time, peering at Michael, and he was the first to avert his eyes. How long have you known about your brother? She asked, finally. I found out today. My mother told me, the boy muttered. Kathy nodded as if she knew the answer. Your mother kept her word. You can hate me, though my mother is my mother. Michael lost control, though, raising his voice. She was a frightened girl without support, abandoned with 2 babies in her arms. And what motivated you? How did you decide to do such a thing in the first place? Kathy closed her eyes and threw a layer of flawless makeup. Michael saw the face of a tired and devastated woman. I could have avoided answering, but I will say that you, young man, can hardly understand what an animal lust for motherhood is. It is an unbearable desire to hold, cuddle, kiss the little lump of life, to breathe in its smell after the 3rd stillborn baby. The doctors insisted that I stop trying. I couldn't accept it. And then the decision in the room turned out to be the right one. There was another reason. My marriage was bursting at the seams. A baby could have brought us together, given us a second chance, but it didn't. Yeah, I lied to my husband. I told him the boy was ours. For a while, William did make us a family again. I spoiled him. He was never denied anything. He had all the toys he could ever want. But fate doesn't like it when people try to cheat. My husband is a military man. I realized too late that I was married. He wasn't married to me at all. It was William's army. He was raised like a little soldier. The boy's wishes weren't put into anything. His father gave him orders and demanded that they be obeyed. They fought all the time. William ran away from home several times, was found and brought back. The gap grew wider and wider, and I realized with despair what I had done. And me. I loved William. He had become my world, my outlet. I tried to compensate him for my father's tyranny with another tyranny, my love. Together, we nearly broke him. William began to scream at night. He was very afraid of doing something wrong and not fitting in. One of the psychologists I took him to suggested telling him the truth. It was a difficult decision, but the psychologist advised it. And I listened. William listened to me with dignity. It even seemed he was relieved to find answers to his questions. And in the morning, I found a note with a request not to look for him and give him the opportunity to live as he wants. That's when I thought he'd gone back to his mother. I had my connections, and soon it was reported to me that William had not appeared in his hometown. I kept looking, and 6 months later he was found in a gypsy camp where Michael could not believe his ears. At the gypsies, a woman repeated herself. It is not known whether he joined the tabor on his own or was lured there, but that was exactly what happened. I wanted to call the police, but my husband forbade me. He knew that William was not a native. Michael was gripped by this strange story. He no longer felt the same anger toward his companion. The doctors had warned him that I could no longer try to conceive, so my deception was exposed immediately. He just didn't admit it at first. Apparently, Jacob loved me in his own way. Then why did William, keeping his adoptive father's middle name, change his last name? Michael wondered. He didn't change Jacob. That was my husband's name. I was the one who kept his maiden name. I see. Michael couldn't wait to hear the details. What happened in the tabor? I don't know the whole story, but I'm sure my husband made a considerable effort to make sure the boy was well received. He was 17 years old at the time. He grew up strong and strong. He didn't try to fight the law. And the life of a gypsy. You can probably imagine it from movies and books. Michael mentally agreed with her. Rather, it was not a tabor in the conventional sense, but a community with its own rules, statutes, and distribution of duties. William became an assistant to the local blacksmith. Occasionally, I received news of his life, sent pictures. That's how I found out the boy had met his love, Adriana. It came out of Michael's mouth. Yes, that was the name they called me. The girl was raised in an orphanage. She, like William, was taken in by gypsies. True, she, unlike him, had gypsy blood in her. Michael saw Adriana's black velvet eyes in his gaze. Then other news began to arrive. The boy decided to become a fireman. Apparently, he wanted to prove something to himself and to us adults who dared to decide for him. I knew he was doing well, and that was enough to live on. When my husband died, I tried to bring William back the people I had sent to meet him. They came back with an answer. He didn't want to see me and asked to be left alone forever. Then a year ago, I found out that my boy tragically died in a fire. End of story. Kathy straightened up in her chair. It pains me very much to look at the young man in you. I see his William. My son, your curiosity is satisfied. I did not come here out of curiosity. Michael understood now that behind this arrogance there was an unrelenting pain of loss. William was never coming back, but there was a girl, his daughter. She is very ill. She needs help. He never once called. It was like I was a stranger to him. Kathy didn't even seem to listen to him, talking to herself. Didn't call me to the wedding. Didn't ask for help. Why was he doing this to me? Michael was silent. And what could he say? Kathy, I have to go. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Goodbye. He stood up and walked toward the exit. Wait a minute. Her shout sounded like the voice of a mortally wounded bird. Michael looked around. The woman in the chair looked as if she had aged a dozen years. Even she had risen, with difficulty, shedding her mask of pride and arrogance. Kathy went to an antique sideboard and took out a box. She opened it. She handed Michael a sizable wad of bills. Here, give it to William's wife. For her daughter. Since my husband's death, I have sold several paintings. It's not enough. But you don't have to do that. Michael, moving his gaze from the woman's face to her hand clutching the money. No, I have to. I am still responsible for William. For how his fate turned out, Kathy answered firmly. Consider that I am doing this out of self-interest. Soon, I will have to answer to a higher judge. Perhaps it may at least make up for the evil I have unwittingly done. And you trust me with such a sum? Michael was still hesitant. Kathy stepped forward and forcibly slipped the money into his hand. Are you William's brother? His copy, and you are here to help his daughter. That's enough of an argument. Now go away. It's really hard for me to see William's copy, knowing he's lying in his grave. She could hardly hold back her sobs. Michael had already grabbed the doorknob. When I heard one request, I would like to see William's family at least once. Kathy, I'm sure they will want to meet you, Michael said, giving himself a word that he would surely persuade Adriana. Too many torn threads turned out in this story. It was high time to tie them together, and he would try to do so. Another strange encounter occurred at the train station. He was walking along the platform when he was called out. Hey, young, handsome, take your time. Let me tell you the whole truth. He turned around. A young, brightly dressed gypsy was demanding his hand. For a second, Michael thought she had somehow miraculously found out about the money Kathy had given him, and he praised himself for putting the whole amount on the card. Sorry, beautiful. I don't have any cash on me. He tried to make a joke. By the way, it was true. But in response, the gypsy shifted her black eyebrows and shook her head. Did I say to Gal the hand? I don't want any money. It's a fortune teller. What a miracle. Michael became curious. There was still time before the train left. So he held out his palm to the gypsy's hand. She whispered something quickly, closing her eyes. Then the stinging eyes opened in amazement. She was. Truly, the card said. Tell me, where is she? Who is she? Michael stunned, ready to listen to the usual nonsense about the long road and the Queen of Hearts. What are you talking about? My lost sister Adriana. The gypsy squeezed her hand so it hurt. The card said that you will show the way to her. Tell me, I beg you. Tell me more. Michael asked. He seemed to have lost his capacity for wonder today. The gypsy's story was confusing, but he got the main point. A girl named Adriana was taken from the orphanage. Her father was a famous blacksmith in the Tabor. She turned out to be the daughter of his dead brother, who had refused to live according to the laws of the Tabor and settled in the city. His wife died in childbirth, but his wife Adriana was not needed, and by the time the blacksmith learned of his brother's death, the orphan had managed to be placed in an orphanage. The blacksmith raised his adopted daughter along with his children. Clara and Adriana became friends and vowed to help each other. Then William came along. Adriana fell in love and went off with him into another life. Clara never saw her again, and yesterday she felt she had to be here at the train station. What about her? How does she live? The gypsy interrogated. William died a year ago. Adriana is doing well, except that Betty's daughter is very ill. A congenital heart defect, Michael answered briefly. The gypsy thought for a moment, then held out her hand demandingly. Now she was sure to ask for money. A thought flashed through her mind, but Clara pronounced the address. And the phone and the girl is our blood gypsy. We can help. Michael believed her. Strange things have been happening to him these past few days. He had almost given up wondering. He wrote his phone number on a piece of notepaper, since he didn't have Adriana's phone number. He promised to find out and let him know. Wait, he was about to say goodbye when Clara detained him again. Do not let go of your destiny. She is a proud blood, hot-hearted loyal. Only here is a special case. One soul for two was shared. Let your brother give permission, then he will find peace. And you, happiness. Now that's a load of nonsense, thought Michael. But he nodded, and Clara disappeared into the crowd, as if she had disappeared. Ethan met him again at the train station. He listened to Michael's story and shook his head. I would have seen it in a movie. I would not have believed it. Now listen to what I have learned in the short time they have not seen each other. Ethan's been very active. He made inquiries in his own circles. They agreed to put the girl under treatment. The amount was really astronomical. But Michael wasn't going to give up. Call, agree. I already have some of it. I'll take out a loan for the rest. All right, I've got some money saved up too. I'll add, the hardest thing is to persuade Adriana, said Michael, and his heart sank in anticipation of an imminent meeting with the black-eyed girl. Forever settled. In his heart. They met there, at Liam's grandfather's house. The landlord himself and Ethan stayed to chat on the bench in the courtyard. Not to embarrass them with his presence, he was already waiting, counting the minutes until the meeting. Adriana almost ran in, and his heart raced. At the first sight of her, Michael told her everything without concealment. She listened very attentively, experiencing the whole story. Sometimes sad, sometimes surprised, sometimes happy. Especially when Michael mentioned his meeting with Clara, when he had fallen silent. Adriana thought deeply. Then, apparently making a decision, she shook her thick hair. Pride is a great sin. We've all been punished enough to bear a grudge. For my daughter's sake, I will accept any help with gratitude. This is my word. If Betty gets better, I'll fix it. We'll be a family. They are both suffering greatly. Michael said quietly, admiring this strong, ready to do anything for the health, happiness, daughter, woman, my and William's mother and his foster mother. Adriana nodded, keeping her eyes on him. I've made mistakes too. Sister named, left my adoptive father and loved him so much I didn't see anything else around me, she confessed. Quiet. There is still time to change things. Michael longed to approach her, to embrace her, but he dared not. She was too proud, too independent, and he was too afraid of frightening her with his impulse, of pushing her away unwillingly. Ethan said we could go to the clinic now, to do the paperwork. Adriana shifted the conversation to another topic. Apparently, she guessed what he was thinking now. I'm so scared. Thinking good thoughts, Michael very easily switched to you. It's going to work out for sure. Betty will get better. Adriana looked at him questioningly, as if he could really give her a definitive answer. And then she took a step and hugged him, hiding her face against his chest. He was frightened that she might hear his heart beating furiously now. I know how you feel. Only we can't. I can't, she whispered, barely audible. So Michael could barely guess the words. It's not fair. It's not fair. As if I were replacing him with you. Clara said that William and I were one soul, that he had to give permission. Michael could barely get those words out. They seemed so strange to him. He was just now torn apart with a passionate desire to grab Adriana in his arms and never let go again. Go away, please. She pulled away with anguish, a look on his face. I'm very grateful for your help. I will always be grateful, but now go away. Don't torture me or yourself. There was a knock at the door, a cautious cough. From the threshold, Grandfather Liam was looking at them reproachfully. Ah, the youth. Young people make each other suffer. They built the walls themselves. Isn't it easier to be alone than together? I can see how attracted you are to each other. Adriana flared up and ran out of the house. It was only then that Michael remembered that he had not complied with Clara's request to give her Adriana's phone. The phone had turned up at his grandfather's house. So after texting back the number and saving the number in his phone, Michael went to his brother's grave. William looked at him from the mourning portrait calmly and seriously, and Michael suddenly had a strange thought. Surely he must have been born first a few seconds or minutes earlier and was the eldest. They might have grown up together, playing, quarreling, and making peace, fighting off the neighborhood boys and the troubles of life, helping each other, sharing secrets. But it so happened that they met only now in the quiet village cemetery. Hello, brother, Michael said in a low voice. Now we have met. Don't be angry with me. I love your Adriana. That's the way it is. I promise that I will help her in everything and hopefully complete the work to which you have dedicated your life. Wish us luck, little brother. It seemed to Michael that his brother, invisible to the eye, was now standing beside him shoulder to shoulder and also looking at his monument. He really wanted to turn around, but he was afraid himself, not knowing what more to see the shadow of his twin near him, or on the contrary, to see no one. Sleep well, little brother. Michael turned and left without looking back, and William followed him out of the picture with the same serious, thoughtful eyes, as if blessing and wishing him good luck. That night, Michael returned home. His own comfortable, tastefully furnished apartment seemed lonely and orphaned. Too big for one person, he returned to his usual work, taking his time from call to call, from text to text. At first, Adriana wrote infrequently, more informing him about how the inevitable paperwork was progressing. Then came the happy news. They had examined Betty at the clinic and given a positive prognosis, not really hoping for anything. Michael suggested switching to video calls. Adriana, however, did not immediately agree. Now they called every day. Gradually, the range of topics expanded. It seemed as if they had known each other all their lives. One day, Adriana got in touch, not in the evening as usual, but at lunchtime. Clara called, very excited, with joyful news. They had a long talk. Then the foster father joined the conversation. They reconciled, and Kathy's husband also transferred to Adriana's account an impressive sum of money collected by all the many relatives. Now there was enough money for sure. The treatment was going well, and very soon they would be back home. It was wonderful. Michael admired her face, her bottomless black eyes, and wondered how he could ever have lived without this wonderful girl. I had a dream. Adriana suddenly changed the subject. William came to me, and we talked like this, just like you are talking now. I told him everything that had happened. I didn't keep anything back. He said he knew everything, and that I was doing the right thing. And you'll be there when we get back, won't you? Of course I will. Michael felt everything inside him freeze, and then his heart felt like it had been restarted, and it was beating at a frantic rate. "Betty wants to meet you," Adriana added, and quickly passed out. He stared at the silence and the cell phone for a long time and repeated to himself her phrase that meant so much. And then the day came when the phone woke him up in the morning with a message that we were home. He packed so hastily, as if his life now depended on speed. Perhaps it did. Even the train seemed too slow for him, and he had taken a plane ticket all his life, wary of flying. The neighbor to his right was a swarthy older man of Eastern appearance. He kept glancing at Michael, who now looked like a shrunken spring. Suddenly, he put his hand on his palm and spoke with a slight accent. "You know, this is the first time I've ever flown next to such a happy man. What makes you think so?" The boy was surprised, but the stranger only smiled and shook his head in response. "I know, and so do you." "You do?" "Yes," Michael answered. It was really like music inside him. He wanted to sing, to run, to embrace the world. The neighbor did not say another word during the entire trip. He either slept or pretended to sleep. When Michael got off the plane, he looked for him with his eyes, but never found him. From the airport, he made his own way to the place, calling Ethan on the way. "How are they?" asked Michael instead of a greeting. "If I believed in miracles, I would say it was a miracle," Ethan declared. "The girl made it. It's worth watching, of course, but she'll be fine for sure." "They'll both be fine. I promise you that," Michael declared. The cab driver turned to him and smiled. "You said it right, you lucky man. Everything will be fine." Adriana and Betty lived in a house near the school, so the right address. Michael found, and without Grandpa Liam's prompting, the car pulled up outside the driveway. He got out, paid, and looked around. "Dad," there was a child's cry from somewhere nearby. Michael flinched and saw how the girl with long pigtails, who had just been playing carelessly with her friends and the dolls, rushed to him at full speed. She threw herself on his neck, covering him with kisses and choking on the words, "Daddy, see, I am well. I knew you would come. I was waiting." He pulled her against him in utter confusion, stroking her back, muttering something inaudible. A curtain twitched on the third floor. A few minutes later, the door of the entryway swung open. Letting Adriana through, she paused a step away, unsure of what to do. Then determinedly she walked over and hugged them both. "Betty, my daughter." She didn't start it. But the girl did not listen to her. Continuing to hug Michael through happy sobs, they both suddenly heard a phrase that made them both stunned. I know, Daddy was in heaven. And now he is here with us again. They're both here. How do you not understand?" And tearing away from his jacket a happy face with huge, clear, bottomless eyes, she said, "Is your name Michael? May I call you Daddy?" "I'll be a good daughter, I promise." "Not may, but must," replied Michael, feeling that now he was a grown man. He would just cry, and he wouldn't even be ashamed. "And I'm a husband," quietly said Adriana. "If you want to, of course. I don't think I've ever wanted anything so much in my life," as Michael uttered it with complete honesty. So the three of them, with Betty in their arms, entered the entryway, which opened straight into their new and happy life.